Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Laudato Si Week dialogue on education. We're so happy to have you from around the world. My name is Amy Echeverria, and I'll be guiding our conversation today. Before we begin, we'd like to indicate to you to participate in the dialogue in different languages. Please go to laudatosiweek.org and select the language of your choice. Por favor, antes de comenzar el diálogo, les invito a seleccionar su idioma preferido. Si vayas a la página web laudatosiweek.org, puedes seleccionar, ahí si tú ves en la pantalla, tú puedes seleccionar tu idioma, inglés, español, portugués, italiano, francés, Polish. Puedes seguir en el idioma of your preference, the language of your choice. As you join, we also invite you to indicate where you're joining from in the chat box. Similarly, in the chat box throughout the dialogue, you can place your comments, your questions, be a part of the conversation in the dialogue as we go. So with those housekeeping technical details that are so important, we want to thank you for spending part of your day with us, and we are thrilled that you have decided to join this webinar on education and integral ecology as part of our Laudato Si Week celebrations and beyond, really. We do have a dynamic and diverse group of inspiring speakers from many parts of the world who are eager to share with you their experiences of bringing Laudato Si to life in their educational context. We will have Jackie Raymond of Listen, a global network of educators dedicated to bringing Laudato Si to life. From Australia. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
We have Severin de Leon of the Laudato Si Research Institute, Campion Hall, Oxford University. Welcome, Severin. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Amy.
We have Adrián Belín, who is with the University Network of the Care of Our Common Home in Argentina. Adrian, I believe, is in Germany from Argentina.
That's right.
And that is the RUC network, as it's known by its Spanish acronym. So welcome, Adrian. We're glad to have you.
Great to be here.
We have Margie File, a professor at the University of Notre Dame in the United States. Margie, welcome.
Thank you.
For being with us. And we also have Alberto López Rosado with the Universidad Francisco de Vitoria in Madrid, Spain. Thank you, Alberto. Muchas gracias. Bienvenido.
You're welcome.
So before we move into our dialogue with our wonderful speakers, let's begin our dialogue by remembering that we are not alone. And we bring our presence into the fullness of the circle of life. And so let's take a moment to acknowledge the presence that we share. We acknowledge God, our Creator. We acknowledge creation and the cosmos as the firstborn of God's love. We acknowledge the first peoples of the lands where we are. And we acknowledge one another as sisters and brothers in the cosmic Christ. We pray an excerpt of this prayer for the 6th anniversary of Laudato Si. Loving God, open our minds and touch our hearts so that we may attend to your gift of creation. Now more than ever, may we feel that we are all connected and interdependent. Enable us to listen and respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the people. May the present sufferings be the birth pangs of a more relational and healthy world. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, in its 2020 message, convoking the Laudato Si special anniversary year, speaks of ecological education as one of the 7 goals of living Laudato Si. It says, ecological education is to rethink and redesign educational curricula and educational institution reform in the spirit of integral ecology, to create ecological awareness and action, promoting the ecological vocation of young people, teachers, and leaders of education. Inspired by these words, we turn now to our speakers. And it's truly my pleasure to facilitate this dialogue among all of you, you 5 voices of leading universities and global networks of education, bringing ecological education to life in different settings. So let's turn now to you, Jackie. Can you share with us your vision and experience for ecological education?
Thanks, Amy. It's such a pleasure to be with you for this event. Thanks for tuning in, everyone who's live now on this streaming. I'd like to start by acknowledging a bit about my story in terms of being an educator. I was educated to be an educator at the University of Melbourne, where I was very passionate about biology and psychology. And then I discovered the earth sciences. I fell in love with those, and I did my teaching degree at the University of Melbourne in secondary schools. I then moved to the Kimberley, where I took up my first post as a sessional lecturer of earth and environmental science, teaching subjects like the global principles of environmental science, natural resource management, and Australian ecosystems. My students were a great inspiration. I had some Indigenous women who were almost double my age in my class. I learned a huge amount from them. I also learned a huge amount from the country that I grew up in. As I said, being born in Melbourne was a very urban cityscape, but I was fortunate enough to spend some time with my family travelling around Australia. It was during this trip that my curiosity grew enormously, and my desire to learn about the uniqueness of all these different places, ecosystems, and people that were part of country. When I graduated and I started my teaching career, I had no idea that this movement was alive in the church through what had been called ecological conversion by Pope John Paul II in 2001. And it was actually the Bishops' Conference in Australia that set up an agency dedicated to bring about ecological conversion that helped bring my love for creation and my faith together. During that journey, I was invited to be part of what was happening in the schools and parishes, dioceses, hospitals, and many communities around the country. It was really clear that there was a yearning for formation in terms of ecological education, but this ecological conversion that was being called for was something incredibly deep. I learnt much from scripture scholars, from ecological theologians like Father Dennis Edwards, and so many that inspired the journey that helped me bring about teacher formation in schools across the country, and then to look at systemic change that was needed for whole systems of school to move forward. This enabled me to think more about how a model, framework, and documentation based on the research that was taking place could be put together. I soon co-created with people on the journey some key aspects that are essential to the journey of ecological conversion in a systems-based approach. Firstly, it needs to be a strategic approach. It needs to bring about goals that are so clear and to work towards them. And now we have the Laudato Si goals as our frame, which is such a gift. It also needs to be systems-based, acknowledging that we are part of ecosystems. Our schools and our universities are also part of these ecosystems, and they're invited to actually keep learning from them and helping them flourish. A key part of the approach is to enable it to be an integrated approach, integrating with the frameworks, the disciplines, and enabling a cross-connection between them all. Seeing our spiritual selves and the whole cosmos as infusing the journey. So the inspiration comes from creation, from our tradition, and from the dialogue that we have with our Creator and one another. This approach I developed into an Assisi model with 6 key dimensions. The first is governance, making sure that the governance of our institutions look holistically across the organisation and enable policy, the mission, and all the different parts of it to start to integrate and to continue to deepen an ecological framing. This is often brought about through a praxis approach called Ecological Practices. Looking at the spiritual life of a university or an organisation, it's possible to embed a whole range of things from an ecological and spiritual perspective, not just on days like World Environment Day or International Biodiversity Day, but every day, including prayers and liturgy and praxis from creation, with creation and one another. The teaching and learning, which is so central to our universities and schools, also is a key dimension to work with this ecological understanding. And of course, beginning with formation on Laudato Si, Querida Amazonia and Fratelli Tutti are such important landmarks, places that enable that ongoing growth and learning. The footprint of our schools and our universities are a key focus as well. The 4th dimension, enabling these to be reduced over time and our spiritual footprint to grow. And of course, caring for country, the importance of looking at our grounds and our facilities, our buildings, how they can reflect a care and a love for creation. And of course, partnerships are so essential on the journey. This is with partners outside of our organisations, our schools and our universities that help us to grow and change and develop and evolve. So those 6 dimensions are critical. And I think when we look at the journey we're on with the Laudato Si action platform, the invitation for a 7-year journey, seeing those phases of moving from awakening to discovering, transforming, sustaining and leading, and finally a 7th year of fellowship, of rest, of understanding that it's time to be in a Sabbath moment. So I think there are some key principles on this journey that I'm sure others will start to tease out as well, and we'll have more dialogue around. So I might just conclude that input session there. Thanks, Amy.
Oh, thanks, Jackie. That was so beautiful, so integrated and holistic. And I just love that image of expanding our spiritual footprint and that ongoing journey of ecological conversion, praxis, contemplation, all the dimensions that you spoke of. So thank you so much, Jackie. And I'd like to turn now to Severin, and I'm reminded of your work and how LSRI is really leading the way in the context of academic research and local communities, that partnership that Jackie spoke about, for example. So Severin, over to you. Please share your work and your story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. So I'm going to show two slides. So the Laudato Si Research Institute is a very young project. We started in October 2019, so we are not 2 years old yet. And we've been instituted as a work of the Jesuit in Britain, and we are part of Champion Hall. So Champion Hall is the permanent private hall of the Jesuits in Oxford. So it functions like a college within the university. And so we are, on the one hand, we are part of the university because we are part of the permanent private hall. But on the other hand, we are not part of the university because we are not part of its faculties and departmental structures. Although some of us are becoming part of departments and faculties, but the institute as such is outside the university institutional structures, which means that we can be quite innovative in bringing people together and especially bringing different disciplines together. And so I just want to share some of the work that we are doing to bring Laudato Si to life in a context like the University of Oxford, which is on the one hand a secular university, but it has very strong theological foundations because all the colleges were funded as places of theological education from the 13th century onwards till the Reformation. And actually, Campion Hall is the first Catholic college to be part of the university in the late 19th century, when the Catholics were allowed to come back to Oxford after 400 years of after the Reformation. So what we are trying to do is, well, first is integrate the care for the earth and for the poor in all the teaching and the research that we are doing, and also integrate that dual response to the cry of the earth and the poor in the different programs. Because we found that in geography, in environmental studies, the social justice component is not very strong, and in the social justice programs, the environmental component is not strong. So we are trying to integrate that, and also bring the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor at the heart of the theological education at the university. And another aspect of our work is this transdisciplinary collaboration. You know, as Laudato Si says, that no branch of science can be left out, and no branch of wisdom can be left out. And so, because of our unique status within the university, we can bring people together from different departments to work together in a way that may not be possible within the kind of silos structure of the university. And the third component of what we do is what we call accompaniment. So that the research that we are doing is not done for the sake of our academic careers, but it is done as a service to the communities who live at the margins. And I'll show a little video of a community in Brazil whose representative visited us last year, David Kopenawa from the Yanomami in Brazil. So we tried that our research be of service to them. And here I've put a picture of Vijay, who is a doctoral student, who is doing work. He's a linguist. He's doing a PhD in linguistic, or he's finished a PhD in linguistic, on protecting a language of a tribe in northeastern India that is disappearing. And so that's what we're trying to do, that our research is enabling the flourishing of people at the margin and the planet or the environment in which they live. And then the fourth component of our work is to bring the wisdom of religious and indigenous traditions at the core of our research and also of our teaching. And in that regard, we can already link with an initiative that is taking place within our secular universities in the decolonizing the curriculum movement. I don't know if you've heard last year or the year before, there was a road must fall movement. So there's a kind of movement to decolonize the university, to try to look critically at our own structures of power and how even the University of Oxford was part of the colonizing enterprise, and how we can revisit that and acknowledge the past in order to shape a new future. And then the fifth component is the education component more specifically. And as a research institute, we are not teaching undergraduate students, but we are mentoring research students, we are mentoring MPhil students, DPhil students. We also aim at providing resources for researchers and academics in the Global South who may not have access to resources. So we are building an online integral ecology library, an open access library of books and resources in integral ecology. And we also are networking for impact. We're networking with the Ecological Alliance network, with Listen, and many other groups that share the same commitment to bringing Laudato Si to life in our educational context. And then finally, that links to the dimension that Jackie had just highlighted about the Sabbath, that whatever we do is also rooted in a spirit of contemplation, of wonder at the world, of paying attention to what is happening around us, and to trying to practice the ecological virtues. And that, we're not just doing research, we're also trying to live out what we are researching, the virtues of wisdom, of simplicity, frugality, and all the other virtues that Laudato Si is highlighting. And we try to live that out in the university context, which is not easy. And yeah, there are compromises, but we are in a process. And I think the journey here is more important than the end point. And I think that I would disagree with Jackie about the importance of goals. I think as Evangelie Gaudium said, that processes are important. It's not just the arrival point, but also the journey and the process that is never ending. And I'll stop here. I don't know whether we show the video now or after Margie's presentation.
Thanks, Severin. Let's watch the video now.
Okay, shall I?
About the mau wow nimi. Uri asing proke kuma. Yanomami Yamaku Sajo Ahetoimi Maki. O meu povo não aceita mineração aqui. Mentiroso, ladrão,
Ahot uliho kapo pulio tayo de mahakwamu yang wano aku hikiong.
Nabupana yamak mamuk taime. Yamak wai hini plaime. Yamak mamuk taime.
Yam hep dia tu yamakana, umi yamakan yam hep dia play. Yam ada kupuna mati yam apa tua yam apa.
Kawan nabo apa nak yai bui. Wanawa beha kona nabo bawa pi yau belakang mata. Nabo yai lalu lai beha kami ya walau kedayuma. Wata heri maki amabru maiken yanumai yamaki ore walu hila mamaki. Ihuru tabi patama bihioi. Kami ama Davi Copenau Yanomami. Eyata Herima Bihion Kawamaka.
the documentary that will come out that was made by David Chopanara. And the question I would like to ask to the panel and to the audience is, how can we respond as an academic institute, as a higher education institute, to the cry of the concrete people like the Yanomamis, whose lives are threatened by deforestation and by gold mining? So how can we as educators respond to that cry of the poor and the cry of the earth, in not only in that case in Brazil, but in many other contexts?
Thank you so much, Severin, for sharing the really important work that is happening at LSRI and Campion Hall, and especially for inviting us and reminding us through the video of the power and importance of listening to and learning from Indigenous communities, their traditional wisdom in this ongoing work of ecological education, transformation, and conversion. Thank you so much for your sharing. And I'd like to turn now to Adrian with Rook. And I'm thinking, Adrian, there's so much to share about the exciting work that you're doing, but I know that for your network, approaching this work in a collaborative, non-denominational way with secular partners as well is really important. So, Adrian, please, we'd love to hear more about what's happening in your world of education.
Thank you, Amy. I think you mentioned at the beginning that the dicastery talked about the importance of changing university curricula. Of course, I couldn't agree more, but that is a slow process. And I think that is why, as a first, yet also a powerful step, the university's Network for the Care of the Common Home, which is the acronym RUC in Spanish, which was founded in 2016, shortly after the publication of Laudato Si, and is currently composed of 42 Latin American universities from 9 countries, has created a flagship training program, which has the academic validation of the network as a whole. That is, of course, no substitute for the change in curricula, but is a first step towards that. It's called the Higher Diploma in Integral Ecology, and I'm its academic director. So the program is addressed mainly at scholars and teachers from the network, so as to create a common interdisciplinary knowledge base that will serve as a foundation for a later curricular reform, but also for research collaboration, teaching exchanges, and so on. But it is also explicitly addressed at practitioners from our extended network of currently 28 civil society organizations, and also open to the general public. So our aim is to feed what US American Mennonite sociologist and peace builder John Paul Lederach calls a critical yeast that makes the larger social dough leaven. Another aspect you emphasized, Amy, is the non-denominational character of RUC. And indeed, while the network explicitly takes inspiration in Laudato Si, and roughly 25% of its member universities are Catholic, it is a foundational principle of the network to remain non-denominational, both mirroring and encouraging the diversity of its membership. Both aspects, the Laudato Si inspiration and the non-denominational character, are reflected in the training program, in the Higher Diploma in Integral Ecology. So on the one hand, the Higher Diploma syllabus mirrors the pastoral methodology of the Latin American Episcopate, for example, See, Judge, Act, and also adopts Laudato Si critiques of the techno-economic determinism that is at the root of the twin cry of the earth and of the poor. But on the other hand, Laudato Si is not framed as a matter of doctrinal faith, but rather brought into dialogue with the relevant scholarly traditions that are or have been addressing social ecological questions for much longer than we Catholics have. Incidentally, I believe that this is also at the core of Laudato Si itself, this horizontal dialogical character, and is also a key factor in explaining the impressive reach that Pope Francis's encyclical has achieved in these years. So another important point I would like to stress is that our focal point at the program is the governance of social ecological transition to sustainability, much in the line that Jackie has lined out before. And this governance is, of course, the great task of our epoch on the one hand, but it's also a convergence point for academic disciplines and other forms of knowledge and of agency, including religious and spiritual traditions and institutions. But we also foreground, of course, the socio-political role of universities in particular as change agents or as agents of cultural transformation. In this regard, and this is the last point I would like to stress, the higher diploma also plays a key diplomatic role, so to speak, at the academia-society interface. We have instituted, for example, a series of public debates on relevant topics. The coming one is precisely on the 6th anniversary of Laudato Si, on 27th of May. You're all warmly invited to join us there. And we have also developed intensive collaborations on different fronts with our institutional allies, including, for example, partaking in Laudato Si, Listen, the Listen Network, which was just referred to before, and also in the university's working group of the forthcoming Laudato Si Action Platform, but also in much more territorial approaches, for example, an advisory commission to the emerging territorial ecclesial network of the Greater American Chaco and the Guarani Aquifer in South America. We're also in the process of creating a think tank and a center of advanced studies by the name of Ecoscene Foundation to systematize and to streamline a research agenda for the sustainability transition, as well as impact-oriented programs. And in this, we're also dialoguing with the Laudato Si Research Institute at Campion Hall. In sum, RUC and its higher diploma in integral ecology are set to mainstreaming the wealth of Laudato Si in Latin American, but also in world society, but also to mainstream the wealth of social theory and debates into our hermeneutics and efforts at implementation of Laudato Si. We did take a risk in seeking to tear down the wall of separating religion from secularized academia, but we're happy that we did. And we are amazed at how fruitful this enterprise has proven to be. Risk-taking, courage, and pluralism, we believe, are signs of the times and are at the core of Laudato Si. We consider, therefore, ourselves fortunate to witness Laudato Si's fruitfulness and are happy to celebrate this 6th anniversary together with all of you. We pray that the yield of Laudato Si will be increased by the hundreds and by the thousands in years to come, as we are in dire need of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. What a beautiful testimony that you've shared from RUC. And it reminds me of Laudato Si and Pope Francis, how he addressed this encyclical. I think for the first time ever in the church's history, an encyclical was addressed to all people of goodwill throughout the world. And it sounds like the work that's happening in RUC and all of our guests here today is really living out that call to be in dialogue and collaboration with all people, institutions of goodwill. So thank you, Adrian, for your really inspiring work. And now, just for those of you who are joining us, you're very welcome. We're having a wonderful conversation, dialogue on education and Laudato Si. Please feel free to indicate where you're joining us from in the chat box, any questions or comments you might have. There will be time for that a bit further along in the dialogue. To our speakers, just a friendly reminder that this conversation is happening in multiple languages. We have translators working hard to make that happen. So we appreciate your attentiveness to speak slowly and clearly as you all have done. Just continue that practice so that all can follow in the language of their choice. So with that slight commercial break, I'd like to come back to our speakers and invite you, Margie, from University of Notre Dame, to share your multidimensional work and how you're integrating and coordinating multiple campuses and departments and ministries and facilities. That sounds like a lot of really exciting work, Margie. Let's hear about it from you.
Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you to each of you on this panel. I'm already learning a lot from those who have spoken, and Jackie, I am so inspired by your vision of ecological praxis, and in what I share, I also want to say that I believe that's a growing edge for us at the University of Notre Dame here in Indiana in the United States, and perhaps we can talk more about that. One fruit of Laudato Si in terms of the curriculum, and Adrienne, I share what you said about the challenges of integrating the notion of integral ecology into a university curriculum. One way that we have done that is to institute a tri-campus course on integral ecology using Laudato Si as the guiding thread. And we have 3 campuses in South Bend that are all rooted in the congregation of Holy Cross, the priests, brothers, and sisters. So in addition to Notre Dame, St. Mary's College, which is run by the Holy Cross Sisters, and then Holy Cross College, which is run by the Holy Cross Brothers. And this course counts now as a second required theology course in the new core curriculum at Notre Dame, which means that students from across the disciplines are able to take this course. And the focus is really rooted in the contemplative dimension of integral ecology, so very much aligned with the ecological virtues that Severine, you spoke about, that are at the heart of Laudato Si's message. There are also several courses across the disciplines, not only in my field of theology, but economics, political science, philosophy, and engineering that have incorporated Laudato Si directly. I think the next step would be to be more intentional in encouraging professors to develop the curriculum using Laudato Si exclusively. There's much more that could be done. As a university, we have people from various disciplines have worked closely with campus ministry to articulate ecological values in the context of liturgy. There is an annual prayer gathering on or near the Feast of St. Francis. I have encouraged my students in the graduate Catholic social teaching course to develop creative ways of encouraging homilies that incorporate integral ecology and connect it to the sacramentality of creation. There's just so much that could be done. It's exciting to think about it. And as a Catholic university, I do believe that is a particular role we can play in connecting the liturgical and sacramental life of the church with the intellectual tradition of the whole Catholic social tradition. There is an upcoming university forum next fall, so this would be a university-wide gathering convened by our president, Father John Jenkins, and it's designed to address the ecological crisis in an interdisciplinary way, directed toward the planetary common good. So what you just said, Amy, about the the address of Laudato Si to all people on the planet even beyond all people of goodwill, I think offers us a kind of charge as a Catholic university. How can we really use the intellectual power at our disposal to really address the whole planet and its needs in this twin crisis of the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor? One way that the university has sought to do this is by reducing its own carbon footprint, which is number one on our list of urgent tasks, because until very recently, the university was actually still using coal. So it has ceased to use coal, and it has set a goal of reducing CO2 emissions by 50% by 2030 and by 80% by 2050. The Utilities Department has said that we have already achieved the first goal, and so it's taking a more aggressive approach. And we have a video to share from our Vice President in charge of utilities, Paul Kemp. So we could show that now.
Thank you, Margie. I think we're getting that video queued up.
Hello, I'm Paul Kemp, the Assistant Vice President for Utilities and Maintenance here at Notre Dame. This morning, I'm standing on a roof of Stenson Remick with one of our solar installations behind me. We have 3 such installations, one here, one by the South Bend Airport, and a great project at the St. Joseph Solar Farm out in St. Joe County, a partnership between ourselves and the Indiana-Michigan Electric Power Company. Solar energy is just one aspect of how we achieve sustainability here at Notre Dame. I believe we're also being recognized for a hydro project that we're working on downtown. All these projects are a commitment by the university to reduce our carbon footprint, and as we continue to work towards our goal of eventually becoming carbon neutral. We're pleased to be a part of the solar array with I&M, which is a 20 megawatt array. The university is going to be a 40% partner or off-taker of the carbon credits from that project, which equates to about 20% of the electrical energy that we use here on campus. Our hydroelectric project will produce about 7% of the electricity we use in total on campus. These 2 projects in total will produce roughly 15 to 20% of renewable energy for our campus. They'll also reduce our carbon emissions by well over 20,000 tons per year. These projects, along with other sustainable initiatives on our part, including our elimination of coal combustion at our power plant, higher efficiency combustion gas turbines, and the fact that we operate a combined heat power system, all contribute to our reductions in carbon. We have some intermediate goals to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 and by 83% by 2050. That said, we are currently working on reevaluating those goals as we've already achieved our 2030 goal and are looking to be more aggressive in the future. This is certainly an area in which the university will continue to work, and we look forward to our other partners in the community contributing to the reduction of carbon in our community for a cleaner and safer environment for future generations.
Wow, thank you, Margie, for sharing your story and the video. Did you have any comment that you wanted to make on the video?
Well, I would just add, I look forward to further conversation because I appreciate the efforts that Paul was just sharing with you. And I am excited about the idea of grounding that kind of action more firmly in ecological values and virtues of integral ecology. I think that contemplative approach is foundational, and it isn't only a matter of developing more technologically efficient means of generating energy. It's also about reducing our consumption. And this is precisely at the heart of connecting the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So I do believe that's a growing edge for our university community here.
Thanks, Margie. you know, I'm hearing you talk about the challenges and the initiatives, and one of the words that really jumped out at me was when you were speaking about intention and being intentional. And I think that's just such an important invitation and call to each of us in all of our contexts to be really intentional about all the processes that we're undergoing and our responses to integrating Laudato Si into our educational settings. Thank you so much, Margie. I know there's so much more to share. But I'd like to turn now to Alberto in Spain, La Universidad Francisco de Vitoria. And you are sharing, Alberto, what's happening with you in your university.
Thank you very much, Amy, and welcome. And good morning to everybody in the US. Good afternoon here in Europe. I will share a short presentation with you. Well, I'm currently working at the University Francisco de Vitoria in Madrid, in Spain, and this is a Catholic university, and our mission is to build a community of people seeking truth and good, inspired in the values of Christian humanism, of course, ethical behavior, personal integrity, and social engagement. So how do we transfer that to the academic action? So currently, by means of mandatory subjects in undergraduate programs related with humanism, ethics, anthropology, history, social responsibility, theology, of course, with an intense social activity action by means of compulsory internships in more than 120 institutions, also voluntary internships as well, and by means of our Altius Foundation, especially this year of the COVID, they have helped a lot of people, families, and children, more than 8,000 people with free food in this very, very difficult and special year of the COVID. So from now on, what happens with Laudato Si and the mission of our university, we think that this encyclical can broaden and enrich our vision. So we launched a new strategic focus in sustainability, added to the previous 12. And as a result, the basic document of mission of our university is under review to include the ideas, the main ideas of the Laudato Si. A group is working on it. Of course, due to that strategic focus, there are some activities and strategic plan, resources, and the alignment of the organization. How do we include Laudato Si in the academic activity? Well, in the undergraduate programs, so far, the contents of the Laudato Si were being taught informally in bachelor subjects, mainly in theology and corporate social responsibility. But from now on, it is included in a more general and structured way in corporate social responsibility subjects common to all the students in our University Francisco de Vitoria. This is the fastest way, the quickest way to do that from the administrative point of view. In Spain, the content of official programs is highly regulated and the change is slow. The contents of Laudato Si are also included in some specific subjects of sustainability and engineering or gastronomy as the foundation of ethical foundation of this kind of subjects. We also are currently considering environmental volunteering, but this year has been a bit difficult to launch that kind of activities. And what about teachers? Well, we carried out an initial diagnostic survey among professors about sustainability and more specifically about their knowledge of the encyclical, the Laudato Si, and this is more or less the result. 30% of our professors didn't know the encyclical at all. 27 they claim to be good in the knowledge of the excellent or good in the knowledge of the encyclical, and 30% they have some knowledge or a few. Then we launched specific training seminars for professors, and now we have a Laudato Si permanent seminar with external experts to build a new discourse to help us to rethink the main document submission of our university. We are considering also some master programs. If we focus on research, we had a previous tradition in social responsibility research with chair research groups, projects and scientific papers and that kind of things. Now we launched specific support funds to research in sustainability, and we are suggesting launching new approaches of research from the Christian or Catholic cosmovision to sustainability and integral ecology. I would say our own proposals beyond the approaches of SDG, for example. Here I show you some examples. For example, the analysis of the family and sustainability and education, the situation of inversion of parent-child role, and the need to listen to young people, because young people, they have the kind of wisdom, or at least some kind of wisdom we need now, and it is hope, it is confidence in the future, it is enthusiasm. We have to listen to them. Also, the experience of loving and living the nature, the creation and integral ecology, the earth as part of the alma mater as well, not only our institutions. The need to listen to young people and to listen to silence and the beauty of nature. Some other areas like the demographic challenge, the abandon of rural areas, how to build new economic models to find a new relation with open air life and nature, pastoral action, and some others. We have to think, I have to mention the lucid approach of Laudato Si to research and technology, the need, the correct orientation and connections between research or technology, integral ecology, ethics, and real human progress. I thank you very much for the approach of the encyclical in the view of research. To change the internal culture is very important. There's an evolution from only human-centered anthropologist-only approach to human plus integral ecology, how to understand the human and social dimensions of ecology. We have to manage the change, and some people need some time to do that. It's important the leadership of Catholic organizations like a global Catholic climate movement, for example, and there is an emotional link with our tradition of intense social action in our university, and to reach that change in the internal culture is important, of course, communication and links. Of course, as the encyclical says, the Laudato Si, there is a great cultural, spiritual, and educational challenge stands before us, of course. Finally, 2020 has been the year of the COVID. We have suffered a frontline tough experience, and we have understood the meaning of a major global problem, the human suffering due to both health and economic degradation, the awareness of the fragility of humankind in general and ourselves as well. We could see a tsunami of solidarity, and the there is, I would say, a strong overload of university activities. Some professors and staff are a bit tired now from this complicated year 2020. In the meantime, despite the degradation of SDG indicators, and there has been a good advance in the background of the legislation in sustainability, at least in Europe, due to the European Union Green Deal directives. And I don't know if maybe in the US in 2021 there are new times or new winds. I don't know how to say that. And in the meantime, the global warming continues, and we will see if we will be able to do the human transformation and the social and economic transformation towards a more ecological way of life. So now I will show you a little video, please. Is it possible to start the video?
Yes, I believe Gabrielle is going to help us with playing your video, Alberto. We're not hearing sound.
This is the end, I think. Wait. We'll launch it from here.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alberto. Listening to you and listening to all of our guests, listening to all of you, this theme of listening keeps coming through so strongly. Listening to young people, listening to indigenous voices, listening to the voice of creation itself. So I'm just loving, and I know that our our viewers are really enjoying how each of you are lifting up all these different voices and the intention of listening. So thank you, Alberto, for your sharing. I'd like to move now to another video that is by our friends in Argentina. Diego prepared for by Diego Solano, I believe, and he's sharing the work of Renova in this video. So Gabriel, could you please play that video for us?
I am Diego Solano from Argentina, founder of the network Renova Más. Honored to be part of this week of celebration with you. Times where Laudato Si becomes a fundamental document to be able to accompany the processes that our world is going through. I believe it is in the schools where we can start get a great example.
Thank you. We're hearing two languages at the same time. Is there a way to...
No, is that correct?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We'll keep listening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Millions of children and young people around the world spend more than 50 years in our Catholic educational institutions. It is there where Chapter 6 of the encyclical letter should become strong as soon as possible. These words quickly turn into action. We see here seeds that will soon bear fruit, the new generation that grows in the midst of the pandemic, that enlightened at the call of God could radiate so many others with his light, the call to the care of our common home. Perhaps some might think, let's do it with time, let's think about it, let's be patient. On this 6th anniversary of Laudato Si, I'm so convinced the time has come to act in our Catholic schools. Encouraged and deeply inspired by the joy and passion of Pope Francis, confirming a path his predecessors for decades regarding the care of our common home and the cry of the poor, we have plenty of tools and spirit to be true agents of change. You and I, together with thousands of leaders, coordinators, educational teams around the world, have the key in our hands to start a new chapter, where compassion for others, the desire to share the joy of the gospel, passion for the care of our common home, are the engine to start a true revolution of love. In every country of the world, this will happen. It's necessary in each town or city, you do it. Don't wait for others to do it. Let's do it. For we know things can change. That's what Laudato Si says in Laudato Si 13. We have to learn to consider everything that COVID-19 pandemic has taught us, transforming the ambition into the hope that we have never experienced before. Sounds like utopia, impossible, but with the help of the Holy Spirit, it will be a reality in the midst of our people. In every hall, every classroom, in our schools, it has to be full of hope, ideas, and emotions that help us to rediscover our deepest root in the Creator. God dreamed of us happy, free, in harmony with each other. For this, it is necessary to break down the barriers of inequality, tear down walls that divide us each other, and so find the paths of unity that help us educate the future generations into the truth of the good news of Jesus. Humanity needs to change. Catholic institutions have to assume a central role in every corner of the world where they are. Future generations there will be able to find light, wisdom, and joy to lead to another lifestyle. We cannot fall into the trap of trying to educate an ecological citizenship, limit ourselves only to inform it without being able to develop concrete action or habits. Allow me to insist,
Es tiempo de
It's time for
acciones que
actions
cambien el
that
curso
change
de la historia,
course of the
aquí y ahora.
history, here and now.
Estos esfuerzos
These efforts
decididamente van a
will
cambiar el
definitely
mundo
change the
tarde o
world
temprano.
sooner or later.
Sabiendo que el primer lugar para
Knowing that the
crecer
first
en
place to
estos
grow in
cambios
these
es,
changes
sin
is,
lugar
without
a
a doubt,
duda,
life
la
in the
vida en la
family.
familia,
It is
resulta
also important to
importante
understand that the
asumir que el
second
segundo
space
espacio
is
es
the
la
school.
escuela. Les comparto dos pequeños
Share
ejemplos.
two small examples.
Aquí en
Here
Argentina,
in
con la red de
Argentina,
laicos Renova
with
Más,
the
hemos dado
Pneumatology
el año pasado un
network,
seminario de
we
formación
have
y
given a
acción Laudato
Laudato
Si
Si
para la
training
congregación San
action
José,
seminar last year for
con
the
11
St. Joseph
colegios en
congregation,
todo nuestro
with
país.
11 schools
Cerca de
from all
70
over the country.
representantes legales,
Around 70
directivos,
legal
docentes
representatives,
y
directors,
hermanas
teachers, and
religiosas
religious
se han
sisters have been
formado
trained so that
para
we
poder
can grow
crecer
in
en
this
este llamado
so-called
Laudato
Laudato
Si
Si
en todas
all
las áreas
areas
de
of
sus
their
instituciones.
institutions.
La segunda acción que les quiero
Second
compartir fue
action
lanzar un
was
taller de
launch
lectura y
a
formación
reading and
en
training workshop
contexto de la
in the
semana
context of
Laudato Si del
Laudato
año
Si week
pasado.
last year.
Fue brindado por
It was
WhatsApp y
provided
se
through
anotaron
WhatsApp.
9.000 personas de
9,000
todo
people
nuestro
from all
país.
over the country
Aproximadamente
participated.
un 10%
Around 10%
eran
of them were
educadores,
educators,
asumiendo un
assuming a
compromiso
concrete
concreto de
commitment to
llevar
bring
lo
what they learned
aprendido a
to
sus
their
instituciones
educational
educativas.
institutions.
Sin duda alguna,
Without a doubt,
el Señor
that
está
it's
llamando.
the
Es
Lord,
tiempo de
He's calling,
responderle
and
con un
it's time
sí
to answer
lo
Him
más
with a
decidido y
yes
firme
as soon
posible.
as possible.
Para finalizar,
To
quisiera
end,
recordar
I
unas
want to
palabras del
recall
apóstol
some
Pablo
words of the
en la segunda
Apostle
carta de
Saint Paul
Corintios,
from the
capítulo
second
4,
letter
versículo
of
6.
Corinthians.
Dios hizo
Light
brillar la
shall
luz en
shine
nuestros
out of
corazones
darkness.
para
Is the
que
one who has
irradie
shone
y
in
dé
our
a
hearts
conocer
the
la
light of the
gloria de
knowledge of
Dios a
glory
otros.
in God in the face of
Una vez
Christ.
que nuestras
Once our
escuelas
schools
estén
are truly
verdaderamente
enlightened by God
iluminadas por
in what
Dios
we
en esto que
propose,
proponemos,
cry of
el
the earth,
clamor de la
the
tierra
cry of the
y el
poor,
clamor de los pobres no dan para más,
there ain't anymore,
comienza un
the
trabajo
greater
mayor.
work begins.
Compartir tanta
Share
gracia
so
del
much
Padre con el
praise of the
resto de las
Father with the
instituciones
rest of
educativas no
non-Catholic educational
católicas,
institutions,
sean cuales sean.
whatever they might be.
Siempre respetando la
Always respecting
regionalidad,
them,
el trabajo en
working in
conjunto, en
unity,
unidad, esto
for
será
joy,
motivo de
hope,
alegría y
and
volverá
security,
viral,
and
permítanme el
understand
verbo, la
that this joy
esperanza,
that brings
la
to the heart,
seguridad,
learning
la
together to
alegría
take
que
care
trae
of
al
our neighbor
corazón, el
and
aprender
our common
juntos
home.
a cuidar al prójimo en la casa
God
común.
help us in this task.
Dios nos
Thank you
ayude en
so
esta
much.
tarea. Muchas gracias.
Wow. Well, thank you, Diego, in Argentina, for sharing a bit of the work of Renova. We were glad to share that with you, and I'm sure you all were listening quite intently, hearing both languages woven together at the same time. I'd like to invite our speakers, please, if you could put in the chat box where it says on the right hand of your screen, if you have a website that you would like participants to visit and learn more about your work, please put that website into the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. And Gabriel, I think, will share that. We'll be able to share that live with the participants. Many of our participants are asking to know more details about your work. So I hope you all are following that invitation to put your URL, your website link into that chat box. And then Gabriel will make it public. Is that correct, Gabriel? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. So moving on to having heard from each of you, watching the video, Severin, that you shared, that it flashed by in an instant, but the women weaving the tapestry there. And I'm thinking that really this conversation and the work that all of you are doing is much like a tapestry. And so I wonder, as you listen to one another, what is that tapestry? How is that emerging for you? What is it looking like? How does it feel to be a part of this transformative work? And maybe how can we invite other universities, institutions, educators, all of the thousands of people watching us now, how can we invite them to be a thread in this tapestry of ecological education? So I just turn those questions over to you and invite you to have a conversation amongst yourselves.
Thanks, Amy. That's wonderful. I think one of the things that we can do is share this work as we are and keep inviting people to join the many wonderful initiatives that are happening. So one that I'd like to do a bit of a shout out about is something that was launched just immediately before this special webinar on education and Laudato Si. We launched the Listen Network, and Listen is an acronym for Laudato Si, International Scholars Tertiary Education Network. So it was formally launched by Father Jostrom at the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, and it was attended by people from Nigeria and all over the world. It was just a great gathering. So I'd just like to encourage you to join Listen if you wish, as an educator from any part of the story, universities, schools, wherever you may be, and hand over to others to do the same.
Thanks, Jackie.
If I may go next, Amy.
Please, Adrian.
You know, I love the metaphor of the tapestry because I think it speaks for the inextricable interwovenness that is required of a truly ecological education. The ecological approach to our socio-environmental crisis, in my view, is an approach that frames it as a crisis of relationality, meaning that this one oikos, the word for home in Greek, the common home, our common home, has been separated in the economy on the one hand and the ecology on the other hand. No, it's the root of both words, economy and ecology. And I think the essence of an ecological education, and it's what I think we all tend to from different angles in our different spaces and experimenting at different scales and so on and so forth, is to try and first of all show that this relationality is there, that this today you called it interdependence, that this interdependence is there, it's constitutive part of our world, but also to restore that interdependence where it has been harmed, it has been undone. And I'm incredibly excited to be a part of this, even if it's a humbling experience, because as Severine said before, it's all about the journey. It's very difficult to see where this is going to end. But I'm also a bit afraid sometimes to feel that this ecological approach is going to stop at the metaphoric level. You know, I think the level of inspiration is a great place to start, but is a terrible place to finish. I think we need to address our unsustainable social, economic, and cultural structures from this ecological, namely relational perspective. Bring it into our analysis, bring it into our critique. And I think this is the main characteristic of Laudato Si. Laudato Si is not some encyclical vaguely talking about the environment and the social issues. That has been with us since the 1970s, not in the Catholic Church, but in the world. I think Laudato Si brings a much more unique, a much more interesting, a much more challenging perspective, which is to approach this from a truly relational perspective, to bring this into our research questions, to bring this into our curricula, as we said before, to bring this into our conversations, to bring this also into our statement and into our relationship with the society and the political sphere. Because I believe it's unavoidable that at some point we need to confront also the things that are not working, right? In an ecosystem, when one species colonizes the whole ecosystem, it's a plague, no? And the ecosystem loses its vitality, its resilience, and eventually dies out. So the sustainability debate has been in such a state for a long time, for decades. And I think Laudato Si comes to reinstate the diversity of global debates on sustainability that we had at some point in the beginnings of these debates in the 60s and 70s, but it requires a honest confrontation with the fact that we are urgently in need of socio-political debate with binding decisions about which doors need to be closed in order for other doors to open. There are certain doors which will not open unless we close other doors. Take agroecology for an example. The 2019 Global Sustainable Development Report, from the UN, for example, makes it very clear that agroecology offers one of the most promising solutions to unsustainable land use and related greenhouse gas emissions. And agroecological practices are trusted to globally bind millions and millions of tons of carbon into the soil. But they're not a business model that promises more or higher profits to the large agribusiness companies that shape our current global food system. So agroecology promises sustainable, not only sustainable, a sustainable biosphere, but also sustainable livelihoods to millions, if not billions of people, but it is largely incompatible with the dominant economic model. If we want to have it anyway, then we need to decide for it and against certain types of industrial agriculture and face the political struggle and contradiction and the ambiguities that go along with that process and that decision making. So I feel that oftentimes the inspirational dimension, which I said, I believe is a great place to start, but not a good place to finish, risks sidelining this other dimension. And I think that would be a terrible mistake. Our job is to unite the inspiration that comes from our spiritual experience, our awe, the awe that we experience for the creation, our understanding of this relationality of all of creation, to bring that into our debate and into our reform and transformation of socioeconomic structures. That is at the root of Laudato Si. So I think we should be very aware of that.
That's amazing, Adrian. And what comes to my mind is allowing ourselves to be the threads that are woven, and not see ourselves always as the weavers, but to allow ourselves that surrender of being woven together. And as you say, there are things that we need to say no to in order to say yes to life. So thank you for that. Any others of our panelists? What would you like to say? Go ahead, Margie.
Well, I was thinking about Diego's video, and the two languages simultaneously brought to mind Pentecost. And one of the things I love about Laudato Si is its emphasis on pneumatology, on the role of the Holy Spirit, and what you were just saying, Amy, about humans, as Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, what need does the earth have of us? That understanding of humility as an ecological virtue, I think, is an understanding to listen for that of the Holy Spirit. And in our Tri-Campus course, we invite students to connect to the charism of the Holy Cross Order, as well as to our shared ecosystem, to listen to creation humbly as human beings, and allow that to be our guide. And I think that it is possible, following along Jackie's vision, which I find so inspiring, to think about asking especially Catholic universities to cultivate practices of humble listening, and for us humans to be able to learn from ecological dynamics, how ecosystems function, as a way of allowing ourselves to be woven by the Spirit.
Thanks, Margie. And I know, Severin, yes, you had some thoughts to share.
Just to follow up, and also on some questions that were asked in the comments about what about the many people who have been left out from higher education. And we're very well aware that we speak here about universities where access is not easy, and so I was wondering, another sector that we haven't talked about, which is social movements and the education that takes place within social movements. I think, for example, Via Campesina or the MST, who have set up their own universities, their own places of learning. And I wonder whether this is something that we should also be exploring, that education for integral ecology should not only stay at the level of the universities like Notre Dame, like Oxford, like the Catholic universities of Spain or Latin America, but also be available to the wider public through adult education or other forms. So just a thought of another type of education that I think is left out, but I think is very important. I think about the popular, the grassroots movement, the Tierra, Techo y Trabajo. I think they're setting up their own universities, aren't they? The Universidad Popular. But yeah, just leave it there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Severin. Alberto, did you have any comments to share?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think the tapestry of ecological education is being designed now. We are really in the very beginning, at least at the level of education at the universities. Our interaction with nature, with the planet, is changing very, very fast. But individuals don't change so fast, and the society, they are slower than individuals, and of course university are the slowest of all of them. We change very slowly, but the problem is that we don't have too much time, so we have to look for some allies. Inside the university, the students, the most powerful force in the university, the students, we can work with them. And important drivers in the society are the economy. We have to find a way to align the economy with the ecology. And if we do that, it will work quite fine. And finally, the political action is important now because the forces of the market, we cannot leave the ecology to the forces of the market. So the political action is a very, very important driver in these times. I think we should find a way of find some allies to do that. Of course, the change in the mindset can also be helped by some content of humanities in our programs. But I think we don't have too much time for that, and the change in the universities and the society is very, very slow. I think, to be honest, I feel a little bit small facing such a huge transformation. How to change the mindset, and how to change a university and the programs. It's not that easy. And looking at the role of universities, I think there are many areas of cooperation in research and several areas among us. But there is, I think, an important role universities that universities can play, and is what I call the fourth function. The main one is teaching, the second is research, the third is the transfer to society, and the fourth is to take a more important role in the society, in the values education, in values, because now we live in a society of lies and fake news and that kind of things, and I think universities can play a more important role in the public space now.
Thank you so much, Alberto. And we've had this conversation for an hour and a half, and I feel that we certainly could go on for days, for sure. But we do need to wrap up our time together. I want to express sincere gratitude to each of you for sharing your stories, for being threads woven into this beautiful tapestry of education and Laudato Si. I know that our participants are, as I said, asking how to learn more about your work, and so we're putting in the chat, I think, some of your websites, but I'd also like to take the opportunity to contextualize this conversation within not only Laudato Si Week, but the opening of the Laudato Si Decade, which will have the Laudato Si platform as a key resource and tool and community space. So I believe, I know that universities is one of the key 7 sectors. And so I'm sure that within the Laudato Si Action platform, which will be going live, the work of all of our wonderful panelists today will be there, along with many other ways that people can get involved in the educational space, in parishes, different formation programs. I know the Global Catholic Climate Movement has a fabulous Laudato Si Animators program that is online and free and available to all who wish to join. So there are all kinds of spaces and platforms for people to engage in this really important educational formational setting. We know that Pope Francis gave an entire chapter to education and spirituality, which indicates to us the centrality of thread that education plays in all of this journey of ecological education, vocation, and conversion. So I'd like to thank again our speakers. I'd like to thank our translators. I'd like to thank Gabrielle and Jonathan on the tech side of things, and especially to all of you, our participants, our fellow educators, looking and learning and listening to how we can bring Laudato Si into our educational settings. So thank you all. We have tomorrow is continuing the celebrations for Laudato Si Week, another webinar on, I believe the theme is fossil fuel divestment, and that will be at 3 p.m. Rome time, May 19th. Tomorrow, please check the Laudato Si Week website for more information and to register. And thank you all.
Thank you very much, Amy. It's been a great pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
And let's be in touch, all of us, to continue the conversation via another platform.
Good to be with you all.
That's right.
Right. Bye.
So, thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.